All right, welcome back to Pro Football Addiction. The Eagles and Commanders for a trip to the Super Bowl NFC Championship this Sunday. Before we talk about that game, Kyle, let's talk about Jaden Daniels. I feel like that's where you have to probably start and end this thing. But the way that he played against Detroit, and really, maybe makes you feel a little bit better as a Bucs fan,
Right.
knowing that at least he didn't torch you like he did them. But the
Sure.
way that he played against Detroit, I don't even really know how to describe a rookie going on the road and just demolishing the number one seed like that. Now, certainly Detroit
Right.
helped them out with a lot of mistakes, but for him to have no mistakes, and play as clean as he did, and the team to play as well as they did, man, they probably are the hottest team right now in football, and one of the more fun ones to watch.
Yeah, tough to argue with that. I mean, and we talked about it with the Commanders after the Bucks game is just how what kind of clean football they've been playing, right? And they just kept that up against the Lions, right? Not beating themselves, not making the big mistake, taking advantage of every opportunity. I mean, the Commanders this whole postseason, when they get the ball, they feel inevitable. You know what I mean? They're pulling a Thanos every time they get their hands on the ball, and just they take what the defense gives, snap in, snap out. They don't give up the big sack. They're not throwing picks. They're holding on to the ball. Um, and then you add to it that you can't get them off the field on fourth down either, right? You've got the Commanders this postseason now are 6 for 9 on fourth down. I mean, 9 attempts itself is pretty crazy, but having that kind of success rate, it's got to be frustrating for a defense. Guys get excited with the third down stop, and then you got to go out there and give up another 8 yards, and they still got the ball, and we've been seeing that constantly. I mean, Jaden Daniels, the thing that stands out to me most with him outside of his throwing ability, his mobility, it's really just he just always feels calm, right? Like, Todd Bowles has made a career on, confusing quarterbacks, getting pressures mixed up. There was none of that with the Bucks game, right? You've got Aaron Glenn for the Lions about to get a head coaching job for the work that he's done, keeping an injured unit, playing at a reasonably high level all year. And I mean, they showed him a lot. I looked at it the other day, just yesterday. They showed him a lot of different looks, and every one it felt like Jay Daniels was reading a book. He just knows where to go with the football all the time. I mean, we don't see this kind of play consistently from almost any quarterback in the league, much less a rookie. And it's really hard not to think that his future in this league is going to be challenging. That top tier of quarterbacks. Putting himself up there with Joe Burrow, with Josh Allen, Lamar, Mahomes. That if he's not already, it won't be long before he's right there in that mix. And being a threat in both through the air and on the ground, and doing it while taking things play by play, stride by stride, not making mistakes is really impressive. So it was, I felt bad for the Lions. You got kind of what's become, I think, seen as playoff Jared Goff showing up a little bit. And as it was happening, I felt like I maybe should have felt that coming. Was just Goff's a good quarterback, but I don't think he's ever been able to prove that he's a great quarterback. And he was just the guy making too many mistakes this past game, and Daniels didn't, and that's the game right there.
On the other side, the Eagles beat the Rams, and a fun stat for you: in 4 quarters of football, I think Florida State defensive lineman had 4.5 sacks. Jared Verse was a big part of that. He had a pretty nice day. Braden Fisk had one, Sweat had one. But the Eagles were able to withstand, and a lot of that had to do with Saquon, who was phenomenal in the game. It felt like the Rams could just never get that really big stop. And, against a really good defensive line that got a lot of pressure and got after Hurts and banged Hurts up a little bit, still just could not stop Saquon, which has been the story of the NFL season. No one has.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles are a team. I think most teams, especially with teams with high level quarterback play, they check out of runs when they see a certain look in the box, right? When defenses commit guys down to come up and stop the run, they go to a pass play, they go to an RPO, they find something as an answer to not just run into this wall of defenders. The Eagles, I think, view it as an opportunity because both the Saquon's big runs in this past game came against runs of boxes of 8 and 9 men. Rams are bringing defenders down, and the Eagles see that if they can create just a little bit of space for Saquon, they can get him past that first level. And if there's not a lot of guys back, he can beat anybody, right? So it's kind of an opposite relationship you normally expect. We saw some throughout the game where the Rams were keeping a lot of too high safeties, I think, to keep Saquon from breaking those long runs. Um, but at some point, you're going to have to find an answer where you're trying to generate tackles for loss, and you're trying to stop him at the line of scrimmage, especially if you're trailing like the Rams were, and that just opened them up on the back end, and Saquon didn't miss, right? So that Eagles offensive line is obviously impressive, and 1 to 5 across, they do their jobs. They get to the second level. They don't miss guys when they get a chance to put a hat on a hat, and it was impressive watching them dominate that game. In a game where Jalen Hurts was not great, right? Throwing the ball in that game was tough. Stafford had more success, I think, just with his big arm, with all that wind. It really affected the Eagles' passing game, and didn't really seem to matter. So that was an impressive showing against the Rams.
How do you like Washington's defense matching up against that pretty prolific run game?
That's a tough matchup for them, and honestly, it's I think by far their biggest problem this game is they had a weak run defense this season. They've struggled against the run a little bit in the postseason so far, giving up some efficiency to both the Bucs and the Lions. Their answer against Detroit was to get out to a big enough lead that stopping the run wasn't as much of a concern, right? Might be tougher against a better Eagles defense than what Detroit was able to put out at this point in the year. The Eagles are tough to beat on that side of the ball. Cooper DeJean's had an underrated rookie year as a corner out there. They get after the quarterback across their front four. They're a tough group, and if the Commanders have a little bit more trouble putting points up early, I think you could see Saquon and that offensive line kind of eating a little bit. And the nice thing for the Eagles compared to last week is this game doesn't have that same weather impact. It's going to be a little cold, but the wind shouldn't be an element. Not expected to be any snow. So if they do have to really start bringing guys forward to try to slow Saquon down, you could see the Eagles take some shots over the top and have some success against that secondary that's had some questions at different times this year.
Felt like the Rams they got a lot of big plays. They got them close, but they just couldn't finish at times. And that's something that I think Washington has done a really good job of. I know their kicking game is certainly shaky, which you wrote here and we can talk about. But you talked about the going forward on fourth down. It's so big because it impacts what they do on third down. Like they are very comfortable picking up 6 yards on third down and 10, knowing that 4th and 3, 4th and 4 is just no big deal, right? And so,
both these teams are happy to run the ball on 3rd and 5. You know, and know that if they're at 4th and 2 on the 40-yard line, they're going to pick that up, 70% of the time. That's a whole new element to defend, right? Yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
So I wonder with that if Washington can be a little bit more effective finishing. I don't know how many field goals they attempt to kick in this game with their issues and with how good they are on 4th. Now, 4th and 12, they're gonna line up and kick, I'm sure. But with how they call the game, with how Jaden seems very comfortable in just taking what's there and not trying to force things, how he certainly has used his legs pretty effectively and maybe gives you an aspect that, Matt didn't. I wonder if they can be more effective offensively, if you're expecting more offensively from them than we got from LA.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have had a really strong red zone defense this year. The Commanders remind me a little bit of last year's Lions. Dan Campbell's the one in these last couple of years that's really started taking these big swings on 4th down that I think fans have been clamoring for over a decade, but we haven't really seen NFL teams adopt until Dan Campbell started doing it, and it was a big failure point for the Lions when they got knocked out of last playoffs. Right, they had a couple 4th downs that went their way most weeks that didn't go their way that week, and that can be the difference, right? So if the Eagles are able to get a few more 4th down stops on their defensive half of the field, that could be a huge difference in this game from what we've seen from Washington, right? Because they're able to get those, get them off the field and then not make mistakes to follow it up. That's a big swing in the scoreboard potentially. If it does come down to kicking, it could be a whirlwind this week. We got Jake Elliott struggled last game. Zane Gonzalez, I really have trouble having much faith in. But if it's not a field goal bout, like I said, the weather's shouldn't be a big factor. For me in this one, it's hard to picture either of these teams really pulling away. I think the Eagles are good enough on defense to slow the Commanders down a little bit compared to what the Lions did. but I expect a tight one. So we'll see how it goes.
What's your pick in it?
Yeah. So right now, I think I would definitely take the Commanders with the points. I think 6 is a really big number to lay on the Eagles in this game. Just it's hard to bet on the Commanders losing to anybody by that much right now with just the way they've been rolling. But I think the Eagles pull out a close one. Give me the Eagles to win by 4 or less. But if I'm betting the line, I'd go Washington.
I'll take the upset. I missed on last week's upset with the
Yeah,
Rams.
sure.
So I'll see if I can go for 2 on on upset calls, and
Yeah.
I'll take Washington in this one. Josh Allen or a Pat Mahomes versus, I mean, just anybody versus Jaden Daniels would be incredibly fun next week. And or in 2 weeks.
It would be interesting to see the rookie in the Super Bowl as a
Yeah.
in his first year. I was reading something the other day, more about Jaden Daniels. He spent a lot of time last year and through this offseason and even throughout the year. He does a lot of virtual reality training, which I think is really interesting. Where they put on virtual reality, he reads defenses at 1.75 times speed,
Oof.
and he's talked about games feeling slow, which is kind of the opposite you normally hear from rookies and guys getting in the NFL. But he's had things slowing down for him on the field between the numbers, just because of the training regimen that the Commanders have been using with him that he brought over from his time at LSU. So that's an interesting aspect to all this is the use of technology to kind of bring him up as a rookie and maybe expedite the process of getting him used to facing NFL competition. So the legends of Jaden Daniels haven't stopped growing yet, but I do have to like the Eagles this week at home. That raucous crowd, a little bit more experience, better on defense. We'll see, but it'll be a fun one. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, he does. He looks relaxed. He looks calm and cool. When everything else is kind of chaotic around him, he never seems to be phased. And again, taking that back to his LSU days, he was the same there. Even really back to Arizona State before he was at LSU, he was just never really phased by much. So,
Sure.
if you guys enjoyed this, if you watched this, leave us a comment. Let us know who you think wins. We broke down the other conference championship game, Bills and Chiefs. You can watch that by clicking the video on the screen right now. We appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to Pro Football Addiction.